When America was very young, there was land, endless, stretching further than the eye could see, further than the imagination could conceive. It was a big country, measured by the distance a man could walk or a horse could run. Men of vision said the national goal must be to tie east to west. It was the 19th century equivalent of putting a man on the moon. But determination, iron, and sweat made it happen. An auspicious event, the beginning of construction of the Union Pacific Railroad, a grandly conceived scheme to span the continent with rails. Grading got underway immediately, but 18 months later, not a single rail had been laid. Delayed by the Civil War, by shortages of materials, the barriers of the frontier, and most of all by the lack of venture capital, the project floundered. But when the war ended, the idea got a second wind, and the railroad was built. Construction attracted worldwide attention, progress marked by miles of track laid. 7 3/4 miles in a single day, 425 miles in 1868. It was said the railroad was built with timbers from Wisconsin, iron from Pittsburgh, and sweat from Ireland. Irish immigrants by the score, 10,000 of them at the end. They came by way of the Civil War, both sides, proud of this job, a staggering undertaking few serious people thought could be done in twice the time. They captured the imagination of Eastern riders who came to see for themselves. Of the track layers, one wrote, "Men seize the end of a rail, come forward at a run. Close behind come the gaugers, spikers, and bolters, and a lively time they make of it. 3 strokes to the spike. There are 10 spikes to a rail, 400 rails to a mile, 1,800 miles to San Francisco. 21 million times are those sledges to come down with their sharp punctuation before the great work of modern America is complete." And then it was complete, at a place called Promontory, joining with the Central Pacific pushing east from California. And one word telegraphed to the world: done. East and West met and permanently forged the work of an age. Done. As the rail stretched westward, small towns sprang up. Some disappeared almost as soon as the track gangs did. Others grew gradually as the operation of the railroads increased. Planners from the Union Pacific, for instance, were instrumental in laying out towns. They knew that for the railroads to thrive, there had to be people to serve. Yet to date, much of the land traversed by the rails was unpopulated. And so they advertised, land. The Union Pacific had been granted 12 million acres by Congress to make construction of the railroad attractive to investors. Railroad agents carried the message to the east and to Europe, encouraging people to settle this new frontier. And settle they did. Thousands of immigrants began arriving by train to build new lives, to farm the rich soil of the plains, a land once called the Great American Desert. The train and the telegraph became their link to the world. By rail, these pioneers were able to ship their products to consumers in the East. Recognizing their importance to each other, the railroads and the farmers worked hand in glove through good times and bad. But if this new and wonderful mode of transportation was to survive financially, it would have to expand, to serve more than just the people at either end of the rails and those scattered along its route. The Union Pacific began adding branch lines linking Kansas City and Denver with the system. In the west, lines were extended to tie Portland and Seattle to the railroad. Under the control of financier Edward H. Harriman, the Union Pacific invested large sums of money to rebuild existing lines and add even more branch lines. Throughout this period, it was the steam locomotive that pulled the trains across America's new frontier. It was a romantic and glamorous era for the steam engine, a symbol of power and grace as it chugged across the new West. Its graceful column of smoke and its whistle that pierced the solitude of the plains were signs of civilization for the many who had settled here. Coal was relatively cheap, it was available, and the railroads themselves had built their own facilities to produce and burn it. Coal would prove a friend to the railroads more than once. As graceful as the steam engine was, as rugged and enduring as it appeared, it had to be pampered. This brawny symbol of power required frequent stops for servicing, to take on huge supplies of fuel and water. It was a search for a more economical locomotive that eventually led to the diesel, which in turn spelled doom for the beloved steam engine. Today, in one of its rare appearances, the steam engine is like a colorful souvenir postcard on wheels, rumbling across mid-America, its whistle an anomaly in a faster-paced world than it knew. This is the Union Pacific's 8444, one of the last steam engines still operating on special occasions. On this outing, 8444 was used to pull an excursion train across Nebraska for Omaha's River City Roundup. Like a page out of history, it thundered across the plains, through towns and villages, its VIP passengers reliving, for a brief moment, a bit of railroading's glorious past. At several stops along the route, including here in Lexington, townspeople stopped what they were doing and came out to see this spectacle. Old-timers brought their cameras and reminisced. School children, too young to really appreciate what they were seeing, flocked to the local depots. Kearney, Grand Island, Columbus, Fremont, in smaller towns and along rural roads in between, Nebraskans lined up to catch a fleeting glimpse of a bygone era. As poetic as this picture was, it wouldn't last. It couldn't last. Something the man at the throttle knew best.
No, we'll never go back to it. The steam engine is too inefficient. And probably the next generation will electrify the railroads, but that's downstream someplace quite a ways.
The steam engine disappeared from regular service in Nebraska in the 1950s. Coaling towers and water tanks, which once dotted the landscape, disappeared with it. While the steam engine, as we remember it, has become a relic, the basic concept has not been junked. In fact, the railroads are experimenting with a modern-day version of the Iron Horse. But so far, it's just that, an experiment. As our hearts often go out to the underdog on the field of competition, we may long for a revival of the steam engine, hoping, however ironic it might seem, that some modern-day version of this proud machine might supplant the seemingly colorless diesel. But for now, at least, that longing must be satisfied with moments like this. There was a time, of course, when the train was a prime mode of transportation in this country. There was no finer way to get from here to there than by riding the rails, when passenger cars like this one were filled with people. But along came the automobile and the airplane, and forced the railroad into making changes. A new generation, surprising as it may seem to some, has never ridden the rails. For some on board this excursion, it was their very first train ride. Yet the train seems to have an instant appeal, offering a refreshing and scenic break from the world of jet lag. Today, records indicate there are only 3,700 passenger train cars in operation in America. 50 years ago, there were more than 60,000.
The Los Angeles Limited leaving.
Yes, in the 1920s, there was no better way to travel than by train. Passenger travel had reached its peak. Trains like the Gold Coast Limited, the Overland Limited, the Columbine, transported Americans to their destination in grand style. They were complete with hot showers and barbershops. Businessmen of the era could even keep tabs on the stock market in the exclusive men's club room. But as the automobile's popularity grew and the Depression hit, passenger travel began to diminish. In 1934, the railroads tried to counter the automobile by introducing streamliners. The Union Pacific City of Salina was the first. It could reach a speed of 110 miles per hour. But the automobile would continue to gain popularity in America. While the railroads played a vital role in World War II by transporting tanks, rations, and troops across the country, their days as a passenger hauler were numbered. Today, what cross-country passenger traffic there is handled by Amtrak, a railroad corporation established by Congress in 1971 to try and halt the decline of railroad passenger traffic. While its service improved and its ridership increased, Amtrak accumulated deficits of over $900 million in 1981, and President Reagan reduced its budget and thus its service the following year. And so the railroads have turned to what they do best, moving freight across this vast country. But the changes on the railroad do not end there. As the railroads created boom towns in the 19th century, they can still create them today. This is Alliance, Nebraska, a living example of a 20th century boom town. Until recently, Alliance was a sleepy railroad town located at the edge of Nebraska's sandhills. The town had been founded in 1888 when the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad reached this point. It remained a railroad division point for years. The town's population fluctuated little, and by the 1970 census, there were but 6,800 people living here. Today, Alliance is a bustling community of over 10,000. National chains like Kmart and McDonald's have now located here on the High Plains. The overnight growth here has been dramatic, and it was fueled, in a word, by coal. Each day, coal trains, 110 cars long, crisscross the sandhills. Up to 100 trains a day, one every 20 minutes. Half of them heading east, carrying coal to power plants in the Midwest, South, and Southeast. Half of them empty, heading west, back to the coal fields in the Powder River Basin of Wyoming to reload. The Arab oil embargo had forced America to look for alternate fuels to power electrical generating plants. It found one in Wyoming. The Burlington Northern, successor to the CB&Q, saw the potential and spent $1.5 billion to build new lines to western coal mines, to build new facilities, to buy new equipment to begin moving that coal. This year, the BN expects to haul 125 million tons of coal, which will account for 1/4 of its total revenue. Geographically, Alliance was ideally located to meet the railroad's expanding needs. In 1977, Burlington spent $46 million here to build a huge maintenance and repair facility that would service the coal trains. It meant jobs, lots of them, and it awoke a once quiet cow town. Where once a dozen or so trains a day passed here, up to 100 now come and go. The westbound locomotives are separated from the trains. They are fueled and sanded here before heading on to Wyoming. Regularly scheduled maintenance is also performed on the diesel units in one of the most modern railroad shops in the world, a building equivalent in size to 5 football fields under one roof. The rail cars, which are owned by the utilities, not the railroad, are also repaired here. Fully loaded eastbound trains on the return trip from the mines make another stop here in Alliance for routine servicing. Currently, the Burlington employs 1,700 people here in Alliance and has a monthly payroll of $5 million. Those jobs have had a definite impact on this community, but Alliance seems to have met the challenge of growth. That growth has played a happy tune on cash registers here. Local merchants saw a steady increase in their sales over a 5-year period until general economic conditions slowed things down everywhere. Some businesses, like this shoe store, located in Alliance after the railroad's expansion, and they've fared well. But longtime merchants say there has been a high turnover in retail outlets because some people were expecting too much.
Some people thought, the railroad's here, things are going to really boom. We can do, kill a fat hog. Just like that with the business. They came in, opened a store, and it didn't work. But the railroad's been good to our town. And I feel that along with our ranching and farming, which is really our backbone, it's been very good to us.
Local subdivisions like this one on Alliance's north side shot up with the economic boom here. It's estimated 150 new homes were constructed. For a time, the realtors couldn't keep up with the demand.
We actually had a seller's market at that time, and we had a lot of demand and not a lot of supply. So we were averaging probably a sale a day.
As the growth has leveled off, some of the subdivisions have gone into receivership. Now the resale of homes is meeting the market demands, and there is little new construction. But as Alliance began to grow, so did the city's crime rate. There were increases in burglaries, robberies, and disturbances here, and people in this once small town had to start locking their doors at night. 5 new officers were hired to beef up the police force here. Lawmen have since busted up one drug-dealing ring operating in town. Reports of child abuse, once unheard of, became more common. Alliance, though far from being an urban center, was being exposed to some big city problems. But the town's youthful chief of police says most of the problems were caused by the workers who were building the railroad facility.
We've noticed a significant leveling off of the crime rate at the time the facility was completed, and that the construction and transient type individuals who floated in for a short time, at the time they left, we've noticed a real stabilization in the crime rate.
What about 33 plus 98?
Schools in Alliance are beginning to feel the crunch. Classrooms in many of the lower grades are getting crowded because many of the young people who came in with the railroad have now settled down, married, and have children reaching school age. Voters here have turned down 5 bond issues since 1978 to build new facilities, a string the superintendent of schools hopes will soon be broken.
Many of them that I know of are becoming much more interested in the school, and as they have children to educate, and certainly I think our national attention and state attention that has been focused on the quality of education has brought it to the attention more people, and I see more active interest on the part of parents in the schools.
The railroad's expansion here drew other industries to Alliance. There have been some layoffs as the economy sagged. There were some predictions that Alliance would reach 20,000 by the 1990 census. But from all indications, that won't happen. Local officials believe the growing pains are over for now, and they believe Alliance is none the worse for wear.
A lot of houses, apartments had to be built. There had to be extensions of city utilities and other utilities. It caused problems, but I think they were handled well.
If you'd ask the average resident on Box Butte Avenue, he probably wouldn't care to hear his town referred to as a boom town, because it signifies a bust could follow. As progressive as it is today, Alliance was built on a solid agricultural base, and though everyone here recognizes the importance of the railroad, they say Alliance would survive somehow, even if the Burlington were to pull out tomorrow. That's not likely to happen, though. Coal, like grain, has become vitally important to railroads like the BN, railroads that have endured some difficult years and face stiff competition for the shipping dollar from barge and truck traffic. But even more important has been legislation which has deregulated the railroad industry and freed it from the red tape that some called a business-stifling, industry-crippling burden.
The Staggers Rail Act of 1980 enabled railroads to make contracts with shippers, something we would never do before, and contracts give the advantage for the railroad of having a steady, known source of business, and for the shipper, a steady, known source of service. Right now, we have about 25% of all our coal movements under contract, which is tremendously important and will become more so.
Deregulation has had other effects as well. It has enabled the railroads to more easily abandon unprofitable lines that once served as a vital link to communities in Nebraska and Iowa. That has become an emotional issue for the people who were cut off in those small towns, and in some cases, they've taken matters into their own hands. For many grain shippers in Iowa, the loss of rail service became a reality when, in this case, the entire Chicago Rock Island Railroad went bankrupt and shut down in 1981. In this case, a group of independent businessmen stepped in, bought their own tiny fleet of locomotives and hopper cars, and began to operate what is known today as the Iowa Railroad Company. The private railroad leases the old Rock Island tracks and offers an alternative for elevators like this one in Adair, Iowa.
That's right. Whatever car load is 4 truckloads. If we load 25 cars, well, it doesn't see how many trucks you'd have to get the business done here.
Today, the Iowa Railroad has expanded to cover 375 miles of track from Council Bluffs to Bureau, Illinois, where it links up with the Baltimore and Ohio line, and it's also operating some branch lines in between. Business has increased steadily. The fleet has grown to 24 locomotives and 600 cars, and the company employs 130 people, many of them former employees of the Rock Island. In the meantime, shippers along the route are banding together to try and buy the rail line and right-of-way from the trustees of the defunct Rock Island. To be sure, nothing can be more devastating to a small community than the loss of rail service. But the railroad industry believes it should not be held hostage and forced to operate unprofitable branch lines, and deregulation has made it easier for them to abandon these lines. President Lincoln signed the act creating the Union Pacific Railroad in 1862, but he probably wouldn't recognize the industry today. The railroads have had to endure change, or go the way of the Pony Express. They have streamlined operations and turned to automation. They have merged to increase efficiency, avoid duplication, and develop more direct routes. And a byproduct is that there are fewer people working for the railroads today. Records indicate that the railroads employ about a fourth of the people they did 35 years ago, but carry more freight. A shining example of modern-day railroad is here at the Bailey Yards in North Platte, Nebraska. This is the heart of the entire Union Pacific system, the largest rail yard in the country. Here, the trains are actually made up, first by sorting cars, and then by sending them down an incline and onto the proper tracks to be grouped with other cars heading for the same destination. This automated yard is 7 miles long, contains more than 200 miles of track, and provides jobs for more than 2,000 people. Inside another building, computers are used to pinpoint the exact locations of east and westbound trains. And hot boxes or hot wheels, which could spell trouble for a fast-moving freight, can be detected by a computer located miles from a remote train. Yet, despite the modernization of this industry, 1982 was not a good year. The recession hit hard. Rail cars and workers were idle. Net operating income for all railroads was down 45% from the year before. Net revenue from operations down 56%. And employment in the industry was off 13%. Still, somehow the industry made money. Now, as grain shipments have begun to pick up, the railroads are beginning to shake the effects of the recession. Deregulation remains an unbridled source of optimism in the industry. It has allowed the railroads more flexibility in setting rates, which has put them in a better position to compete.
That's very encouraging.
The chairman of the Union Pacific system says despite the difficulties of recent years, the railroads are in pretty good health.
I feel pretty bullish about the railroad industry. I think if this works out right, and I think it will, the deregulation is giving us a tremendous opportunity to be more competitive and to build our business, which is what we're here for. And I just can't help but think that we'll do well for the next 100 years. It's rather interesting. The railroad industry is one of the few industries that has over 100 year, 130 year, 40 year history, and it's still in business and still thriving. It's a different kind of business, and of course you have to change. We were still doing some of the things we were doing 130 years ago. We'd have gone by the way of the horse and buggy. But there aren't many industries that have survived and continue to prosper for 130 years.
Many premature epitaphs have been written about the railroads, but somehow this tough old industry has always managed to stay on track. Now, leaner rail lines, buoyed by a new competitive spirit, are highballing into yet another era of railroading. Another chapter in a revolution on rails.